What's up, world, and welcome back to the Global Frequency. I am your host, Nefarious. With me is Adam Lawson from Gifted Rebels, and this is Rebel Frequency. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of comic books that have come up in the past couple of weeks. We have got, I think, Thundercats, right? We've got Bloodrik, and we've got Ghost Machine. Orcstain. You want to talk about Orcstain? I'll talk about Orcstain, man.
I'm always willing to talk about James Sequoy. Always.
Sequoy is, yeah, he's fantastic. I think I got Wonton Soup around here somewhere too.
Dude, you have Wonton Soup. I've been tracking all this stuff down on eBay. Orcstain, Godzilla, Orphan and the Five Beasts. This guy.
Orphan was fantastic, man.
Orphan was just like, I mean, it was about this. I mean, I haven't had that much fun in a book. It was a kung fu movie. I mean, the Thunder Thighs beast. It's just amazing. Not enough.
There's so much, man. So much cool stuff is going on. I mean, like, look at Jawbone Death, right? It's got that rough, very detailed, very grisly, visceral feel to it. Like a lot of that, even Daniel Warren Johnson early on, James Herron too, they built this sort of style up and it's become very, very popular. I mean, hold on. Let me zoom in on you.
Yeah.
You can compare that to one of the splash. What's that?
Jawbone. These are advanced copies of Jawbone Death, by the way. I always get a couple printed and sent to me so I can triple check the blacks and make sure the book's actually awesome and I didn't miss any, and some lettering didn't go through in a layer or something like that. But yeah, I love it. And you can see the foil, this cool. I love foil.
Gorgeous.
It's just so fun to pick up a foil book and hold it in your hands, right? You're like, man, I got something special. These will all be signed, Jason and myself. Fortunately, this lives right by me, so we can do it all together. This epic double splash page. So many good pages here. Jason really poured his heart into these pages, but this is Jawbone Death. This is my favorite single page here. This guy.
Yeah, definitely a worthy page. I mean, that's the promotion page. Honestly, that's the page, that you used on the campaign. I think it's even in the background on the video that we did. I know the Jawbone Death is currently the wallpaper for this episode.
Yep.
Yeah, it was on the cover. Yeah, that's what we're looking at right now. Yeah, that's the wraparound cover.
Speaking of amazing barbarian stories, and we're talking about Bloodrik today, but also Axe Wielder John, which was a top 5 book of last year. It was my #1 book, in fact, and it was a crowdfunded book on Zoop. Nick Pitara. You need to be reading that book, but he is doing a cover now. We just added to the campaign page today. Those are going to be numbered and also foil as well.
Nice.
It's going to be a thing of beauty. It'll also have two covers to it. It'll be the same image in different color, differently on the front and back. But speaking of these sort of auteur guys, like Nick, there's Andrew Crank. I think I'm saying that right. It's Crank, right?
I can't pronounce anybody's name until they tell me. Like you said, Stokoe earlier. I call him Stokoe, Stoko. I don't know how to say it, right?
Stokoe. Yeah. But I know it's hard, and I feel bad when I mispronounce it. And it's like I only know the letters. Well, but I love your work.
They're free to come on and correct us in person. I mean, I'm fine with that if they want to come.
Andrew Crank, I would love to talk to. I know this is like his debut book, and he's spent all this time on it.
10 years developing.
10 years. Yeah, and if you're not reading this, you're just kind of missing out on the most fun you can have in comics. This is a Conan story, and I say that not to say everything is a Conan story, but it deals with a barbarian. So that's kind of your first thoughts. It's a barbarian story. But what's unique about this is it's really a story about deep into the shoe leather of the story. Every step he takes, every corner he turns, every little thought he has. It's one, what we oftentimes do is really compress storytelling, right? Where in one page, you're 5 years in the future, the next page, it's in the middle of the big war, right? This is the opposite of that. It's super uncompressed storytelling. Every nuanced journey along the way on this hunt that he goes on that leads him into the snow. He's starving. He's trying to get food for his people, and it leads him to this dead village, and don't want to spoil what's beyond that. This book is kind of hard to talk about because everything is a spoiler in it. But what Andrew Crank has done, he's built a lyrical story too. There's a narrator, this sort of old sage, sort of think the old man that told Conan.
Yeah, the blacksmith, the guy forging the blade in the beginning of the book.
Exactly. He kind of gives this framing for the storyline, and then there's also and he creates almost a lyrical, mythical approach to it. Then you have lots of his thoughts, but his thoughts aren't coming from him. They're coming from this narrator saying like that he lost his mind versus I have lost my mind. So it gives you a slightly detached experience from him in an effective way. It makes the story more mythical, more of a fable. And then Andrew, he's writing, coloring, lettering, drawing, he's the whole thing in one, like a James Decoy. You can see these incredible pages, the emotion in them, this layout. And sometimes I like about these auteur guys is because they're not limited by page, because they don't have a page rate they're paying to somebody else. It's just how much do they want to put in, right? James Herron with Ultra Mega felt that same way to 60-page issue one.
The chunky issues,
Yeah, you're getting like, this is like a 40-page issue. You compare that to Thundercats, and it's like, you feel like you got robbed with this guy when you look at that,
That was a problem, putting the two side by side, yeah.
Yeah, it was a problem, but because of that, when you get this book, it feels like, boy, every penny was worth it, and that you're like crawling into this creator's mind, and then he does these like fun quotes
on the back,
and there's a mini story in each one. So he does these mini stories. You can see where it kind of starts here later in the book. He talks about this other sort of separate story about Bloodrik that deals with the main storyline. So it has this novel-like energy to it. I can't say enough good things about it, because there really isn't a book like it. It's just a special book.
I think you're right. I think intimate's a great way to put it, because as you read the story of Bloodrik, you get very little about who Bloodrik is, right? Like, you learn he comes from a land that is currently devoid of game, and that's why he's on his hunt. We don't get like touchstones and names and places to like really fill out our understanding of the world. What we get is who Bloodrik is inside. We get his internal monologue and feelings as narrated by, like you said, the blacksmith, and we get a sense of his personality and the way he thinks and the way he behaves, and you get a much deeper understanding, I think, of the character that way, which keeps all of his more superficial details vague, but tells us the intimate details. And so I think the term intimate that you used earlier is so appropriate, and that's leads to the little stories in the back of each issue, like the little vignettes. I think they were great. So the narrators of those stories, we don't know who they are. We don't know how they know Bloodrik. We don't know anything. They may be unreliable narrators. We don't know.
Yeah.
They may just make this shit up. But we don't care, because we're learning more about the inner workings of who Bloodrik is.
And another thing that Andrew does is, see this thing that's creating a cover section here. He gives these little anecdotes about his creative process that feel very candid and intimate. So you also feel like you're getting to know him in a meaningful way in his creation, in not necessarily like what his politics are, what his family life was, or whatever that, but you get to know him as a creator and how his brain works. And so it just becomes this intertwining web. It's just like, this is something special. Yeah, it's just another way to say it.
So much of the storytelling is done in a very deliberate show me, don't tell me way. Like, there is a little bit of narration that gives us a little bit of hint to what Bloodrik's going through inside while he's doing the things that he's doing. But it's all very deliberately shown. And he's able to take his time, like you said, and do these more oversized issues. And there's only 3 of them, because he's an auteur. And he's able to show us exactly what he wants us to see. And I think that separates his style of storytelling and the book that he's putting out from something more commercial.
Right. That's right. That's totally right. Well, versus I think Thundercats here.
Thundercats. Yeah.
Boom. I got the J. Lee cover. I was trying to get the Rob Liefeld one. The shop I went to here in Atlanta, I'm shooting a commercial here, didn't have it. And this is Drew Moss Interiors, by the way, who did a cover for me for The Exiled. So I got a lot of love for Drew. Great artist. I like how he's interpreted the characters. It's interesting because coming to this, I did 2 things. I read Old Dog by the writer of this book, which, gosh, this is a great spy book. I loved it. I just really loved it. There'll be another review coming out about that. And then I also watched episode 1 of the original cartoon with my son, and just kind of get a flavor for this. so I could come into this with some knowledge of what I was getting into. And definitely Drew captured really, really authentically the cartoon, right? Like he paid great homage to what the cartoon was and how it looks and feels. And then Declan really paid great mind to the dialogue. Like this feels like a kid's comic, just like the show felt like a kid's show. Unlike when you go to the Energon universe, there's more to come about this later on. They took a kid's universe, Transformers, G.I. Joe, and made it an adult universe in its depth and violence and complexity, which I love. And I love these two creators, Daniel Warren Johnson and Josh Williamson, of the best. But this one, they chose a different pathway and they made it kids friendly. And, I have kids. And so you think at first you think, oh man, they didn't age it up with me. But the benefit of what they did with this is then now you can hand this to your 5-year-old and it lands. And I've been seeing that a lot of people were a lot of friends in my circle here in Los Angeles were like, I'm really bummed about the new He-Man story because they matured it. They made it for the audience who watched it when they were kids, because now I don't want to watch it with my own kids because it's kind of too violent and too adult themed. And I can see that, like, hey, there's a valid point in like, if you make it kid friendly, 5-year-old friendly, you could sit down with your child. If you got people's heads getting crushed, you're not sitting down with your 5-year-old. And Declan, it's interesting because Old Dog is very mature and this is very young, and you can see the range of him as a creator. It's pretty special. This is something
talking about Ghost Machine.
This is, a collective of creators coming together. I would say headed up by Jeff Johns, because he's really the creative voice behind this. Jeff Johns is somebody I met years ago when I first came to Los Angeles. Really nice fellow. And his Geiger universe is sort of a key figure in this, which I genuinely liked it printed on Image. I genuinely thought it was pretty good. And we talked about Distillery. I was unfortunately just somewhat disappointed at the stories. I just didn't feel like, and they had such a pretense about it. This was they were changing the game. And so you expect, well, then there better be like Berserk in there, right? There better be, there better be Sin City in there. And then you just like, oh, So that was tough for me on Distillery. But with Ghost Machine, I kind of hit it a bit more in the middle. I don't know what you felt about it. Like there's a handful of stories in here. There's Geiger, which I read the initial trade of that. And then there's also this unique world called the Rook Exodus. Now, this I think they did better art here. The Rook Exodus, you can see just how they did something what I would consider really beautiful art, and it's also just great storytelling. There's lots of motion and emotion. The design work is tremendous in it. And the characters. But however, what's interesting is I didn't find myself emotionally moved really at all by Rook Exodus, and it's such a bummer because when I'm like I love animal superheroes who like get their powers from animals. You can see they have all these masks that they wear, and then they can speak to that animal species and get powers from them. You can see here, they've got different, like they've got a wolf here, they've got this warthog, they've got this deer, a bear. So I'm just like, I look at these designs. I love these designs. I really love the art style, and I love the animal like partner. This kind of hero work I'm all about it. I just didn't feel anything. I'm going to be willing to try an issue or two to see if that changes, just because I really want this design to pay off. But unfortunately, with either of those stories, just nothing there.
What about the Rockefellers?
I think that the Rockefellers is an interesting story. This family lost in time, from the future, hiding out in time. Bad things.
We don't really know why, but I'm sure we'll find out.
I think there's definitely felt more connection to that than the previous two stories on that. I'm interested to see. It's maybe not my story that I'm dying to get into in a comic book, but I felt like that had some real was quite interesting. I think the story that got me the most interested was Hyde Street.
Yep.
And I loved the way
that page of ads. That page of ads, ridiculous, man.
Such a great page of ads.
It went over so many people's heads, clean over their heads. Nobody got it. It was great.
I loved that. Loved that. But you can see once again, they've also got really beautiful lines and art. I mean, they delivered in the art game right here, right? That these pages feel just tremendous. Now I'm interested in it because you've got this like bizarre like Boy Scout who's like, yeah, I don't help people find things. I help people find what they're actually looking for, right? And it's like this little boy who's a Boy Scout who's caught up in this world of horror, this Hollywood guy. This had enough intrigue in it where I was like, ooh, I'd want to read issue 1 and 2 and see where that goes. So I look at these things like this, and they're kind of like a shared universe, and they kind of make a big push up front. Distillery does too. It's a collective. We're all sharing in the monies. I mean, I don't know from an audience standpoint that gives you anything. For the record, the price of the book is the same. The amount of pages is going to be the same. And once again, this isn't Berserk. It's not Meta Barons. So I'm not sure what
that's just not fair, though. It's just not fair.
What I'm trying to say is when somebody drops, we've got this collective. No one's ever done this before. You expect then the quality of the writing and the stories to then be a higher level.
And the thing is, we have seen it before, right? Maybe not to the degree that Ghost Machine is doing it on paper, as far as the structure of the business being a true collective cooperative. But we have seen that in comics. And we've also got Distillery, Bad Idea, and the Granddaddy Mall Image, where these independent creators, individual creators from the industry came together and formed multiple separate studios that worked under a collective banner. Image. So I know this is everybody owns a piece of the company, right? They all are invested in it.
Yeah. It's much more.
So like it's more of like a socialist cooperative. I actually ran one of those. They don't really tend to work out very well.
Unfortunately not, because with all things in the artist world, unfortunately, the truth be told of it is this book sold 180,000 copies this week, right? And, this book probably sold 10. That's a massive disparity, a massive disparity in comics. And so that only lasts for so long before the guy who's making the one that's selling 180,000 is a little sad that all of his work and all of their success is only paying them off in the same way it's paying off the guy who isn't as successful. And the way that sort of collective works out, and they don't really reveal the financials on it, but they make it a big thrust, which is odd, like a promotion, like, this is how we're marketing it. There's one thing if you do that behind the scenes, but like you're marketing it as part of why your company's special. And I always think that with anybody launching something new, you can fall under your own pretense, right? You can commit suicide by your own pretense of what you are. And I need to try a couple Distillery books in the single issue to see on that was. But I feel like, there's new chapters coming out. I think there's this time in comics where people in general are saying, listen, the big two are the past, and they are the past. I don't think that's a weird thing to say. They're the past. There's definitely not what the kids are reading. Definitely not. And no matter how many $250 million movies they make, I'm sitting right next to the soundstage where they're shooting them. No matter how many of those they make, the sales of comics don't go up. They only actually go down. So if you're spending $250 million on an ad, essentially, for your comic, and that sale of that comic doesn't go up, you're not a business. You're not a business. You're the past. Not that they're evil, whatever. It's just they're the past. And I think a lot of these people can see the writing on the wall. And unfortunately, the comic shop on the local comic shop side is really struggling. I went to some local shops here as well, because there is this transition happening. The older guys, they feel like those big two stories have lost their way or whatever, and adapting to the newer stories and finding places to hang out. And it's really a hard spot that in general that the business is in. And so I feel that these creators, for sure, I think you're seeing all the writing on the wall. They need to build something new and get off those sinking ships. That's why I think crowdfunding is cool. It's an opportunity for people to sort of the audience to be the one voting, versus the editor to be the one voting. And there's something special about that. So indie comics are rad. Get them from your local shop, get them online from indie creators, and help support it that way.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. So I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you once again for tuning in. Be sure to click like, subscribe, and the bell for notifications, and tune in to Rebel Frequency. We'll see you next time.
Boom.